الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
الحمد لله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم ثم ما بعد. Brothers and sisters in Islam, Ramadan has come and gone. And whether or not you are only able to come to the masjid a few times during that month, or only recite a few surahs from the Quran a few times during the month, or whether you are here in the masjid every single day, praying every rak'ah of every tarawih and reading every surah in the Quran, I ask that Allah accept your efforts. I ask that He accept your prayers and your supplications and of course your fast. But now that the month is over, it would be a grievous mistake to simply move on with our lives without reflecting on this past month. Reflecting on what we did and what we did not. Reflecting on its meanings and upon what comes next. What was Ramadan ultimately about? What was this blessed month meant to do for us, meant to be for us? When we think of Ramadan, we tend to think of fasting, naturally. We think of it as the month of fasting. But when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes Ramadan in the Quran, He does not call it the month of fasting. He says, شَهْرُ رَمَضَانَ الَّذِي أُنزِلَ فِيهِ الْقُرْآنِ. The month of Ramadan in which the Quran was sent down. So it's the Quran that rests at the heart of this month. And fasting is ultimately secondary to that. And in fact, in many ways, our fasting was prescribed to bring us closer to the Quran. Allah tells us, كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ لعلكم تتقون. كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. Fasting was prescribed for you, as it was prescribed to those who came before you, as it was prescribed to those who came before you, so that you may cultivate taqwa, so you may become from amongst those who are mindful of God, who have God consciousness, who have taqwa. And at the beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah, what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tell us about taqwa? Alif Lam Mim, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. This book, which is like no other, is a guidance for those who have taqwa. So Ramadan, our fast during Ramadan was meant to cultivate this taqwa And the more we cultivate this taqwa, the more we will be able to perceive and appreciate the Quran. So fasting, in fact, brings us closer to the hidayah, brings us closer to this guidance, the guidance of the Quran. And the more that we live by this guidance, the more that we harmonize our lives and our ethos with it, the closer that we become to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah in fact tells us, He tells us what we should be feeling at the conclusion of this month. He tells us, وَلِتُكْمِلُوا الْعِدَّةَ وَلِتُكَبِّرُوا اللَّهَ عَلَى مَا هَدَاكُمْ وَلَعَلَّكُمْ تَشْكُرُونَ. So that you may complete these prescribed days, this prescribed number of days for you, so that you may magnify Allah for the hidayah that He has brought you, the guidance that He has brought you, and so that you may be grateful. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَشْكُرُونَ. So that you may be grateful. So at the end of this month, and in fact on the day of Eid, we should be grateful. The end of Ramadan and the day of Eid is meant to be a time of immense gratitude. Of immense gratitude for what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has favored us with, has blessed us with. And we can only perceive a fraction of these favors. And Allah affirms this. He said, if you try to count these favors, you would not be able to. You would not be able to enumerate them. لا تحصوها. You would not be able to encompass these favors. So we are only dimly aware of all the ways that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us. And so when we woke up yesterday on the day of Eid, we should have woke up saying, Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah for Ramadan. Alhamdulillah for the observance of Ramadan. Alhamdulillah for Islam. Alhamdulillah for our Iman. Alhamdulillah for our Deen. SubhanAllah, brothers and sisters, there are people who spend their entire lives searching for the peace of mind, for the spiritual sustenance that Islam provides, and some of them never find it. Some of them die without ever finding it. And here we are, most of us, born with Islam in our laps. And we experience it as a burden, as a chore, as something to be thrown away, or at best, to be tolerated, to put up with. So we deny ourselves the sweetness of the faith that we were blessed with, that we didn't have to work to find, but which we were born into. So this is an immense blessing, and it is one for which we must always remain grateful. And so this time after the conclusion of Ramadan, this time of Eid, of joy and celebration, it is ultimately a time of gratitude, a time for thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And some of us will not thank. But for those of us who have taqwa, for those of us who have seen and appreciated the hidayah, this is at its heart a time of gratitude, a time of saying Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah. وأقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي.
معنا جون علي يعني بنسيامه بعدك خطة إن شاء الله.
Thanks.
عايز تقول له كلمتين تفرح كده.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam, thumma ma ba'd. Brothers and sisters in Islam, Ramadan is over. So now what is asked of us? I think we find an instructive lesson in maybe an unexpected place. If you look at the statistics out there on those who diet, you will find that they are pretty dire. People who diet, who try to shed some weight, you'll find that they will spend months, if not years, obsessively tracking everything that they eat, analyzing everything on every nutrition label of everything that they buy, going to the gym every day. And they'll succeed for a time in shedding that weight. But according to most studies, 80 to 90% of these people will eventually rebound. They'll eventually gain all the weight that they lost. And in fact, some of them end up worse off than when they started. This, unfortunately, is the relationship that many of us have with Ramadan. During Ramadan, we go on an austere spiritual diet. So whereas we once came to the masjid once every week or once every month, now we come every day. Whereas the Mus'haf throughout the year laid sitting on the shelf gathering dust, now we opened it every day, reading from it, reciting it every day. The things we watched that we weren't supposed to, we stopped watching. That we ate that we weren't supposed to, we stopped eating. That we listened to that we weren't supposed to, we stopped listening to. That we said that we weren't supposed to, we stopped saying. So we went on a spiritual diet. We shed the weight of all of the sin that we had been carrying with us. But then, now that the month is over, now that that spiritual energy is beginning to dissipate, many of us will slowly let go of that diet. And in a few months, we will be where we were before Ramadan started. All of the weight of the sin that we shed will gain it right back. And some of us will in fact end up in a worse state than before Ramadan. They'll develop a few new bad habits. This is exactly what we must guard against in these coming months. There is no doubt that after Ramadan, it is not nearly as easy to do all the things that we were doing during Ramadan. Ramadan is a blessed time. It's a time of barakah, a time of intense spiritual energy, a time when it is easier than ever to increase our iman. And so after Ramadan, there will almost inevitably be a dip. What we should strive to do, though, is to ensure that we don't dip to the same place we were before the month of Ramadan. We might dip slightly. We might not come to the masjid as often as we came during Ramadan, might not read the Quran as often as we did during Ramadan, might not supplicate as often as we did during Ramadan. And that's all right, so long as we ensure that some of the progress that we made during Ramadan remains. So that some of the new habits we established during Ramadan, they last us beyond Ramadan. And this is how we can keep Ramadan ongoing throughout the rest of the year. Ramadan does not have to end with the arrival of Eid. It can last for the rest of the year, until the next Ramadan. So long as we keep its spirit alive, so long as we maintain at least some of the habits that we developed during this past month, at least some of the changes that we made during this past month. And it is a blessing. It is a blessing that immediately after Ramadan, it is a sunnah to fast the 6 days of Shawwal. It is as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us this chance to preserve some of our momentum. So we are given the 6 days of Shawwal as sunnah to fast, so that we don't forget so quickly what it is that we achieved and experienced during Ramadan. And for the fast of these 6 days, we are given a reward as if we had fasted the entire year. So let us fast the 6 days of Shawwal, so that perhaps it will carry us through, it will carry us forward until, inshallah, I ask Allah, inshallah, next Ramadan. So let's take advantage of this favor. Again, yet another favor that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. Let us not regain all of the weight of sin that we were able to shed during Ramadan. Let's keep that weight off. Because brothers and sisters, Islam is not ultimately a diet. It's not something that we do for a few months and then drop. Islam is our life. It is how we live every single day. So let's not treat Ramadan as though it were some mere spiritual diet. Let's treat Ramadan as though it were a new beginning. A new beginning for us, for our spiritual lives. So that next Ramadan, we don't look back and say, I'm starting over, but rather I am continuing what I have already begun building. So I ask Allah to accept our Ramadan, to accept our fast this past Ramadan, to accept our prayers, to accept our supplications. I ask Allah to make this a time of joy and celebration, not just for us here at home, but for our brothers and sisters all around the world, for those who are suffering in Palestine and Syria and Yemen and China and all over the world. And I ask Allah to gather us together next Ramadan as He gathered us together for this one. اللهم ادخلنا جنته ونجنا من النار اللهم ادخلنا جنته ونجنا من النار اللهم اغفر لنا ذنوبنا واسرافنا في امرنا وثبت اقدامنا وانصرنا على القوم الكافرين اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الاحياء منهم والاموات انك قريب مجيب الدعوات عباد الله ان الله يأمر بالعدل والاحسان وايتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون اذكروا الله يذكركم وذكر الله أكبر والله يعلم ما تصنعون وأقم الصلاة.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
Brothers and sisters, if you could just, inshallah, after the salah, just remain seated for a minute or two. We have, inshallah, a brother who's going to take his shahada after the salah, so if you could just remain for a few minutes, inshallah. Jazakallah khairan. Allahu Akbar. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. إذا جاء نصر الله والفتح ورأيت الناس يدخلون في دين الله أفواجا فسبح بحمد ربك واستغفره إنه كان توابا. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، الرحمن الرحيم، مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم، صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. قل أعوذ برب الناس، ملك الناس، إله الناس، من شر الوسواس الخناس، الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
You're gonna repeat after me.
بسم الله. أشهد
أشهد
أن لا إله
أن لا إله
إلا الله،
إلا الله،
وأشهد
وأشهد
أن
أن
محمد
محمد
عبده
عبده
ورسوله.
ورسوله.
I testify
I testify
that there is no God
there is no God
but Allah,
but Allah,
and that Muhammad
and Muhammad
is his prophet.
is his prophet.
Takbir. Takbir. Takbir.
Thank you. Thank you.